Second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah.
You're welcome to stay.
Okay. Takes us to next item on agenda 6B. There's a couple for Community and Business Relations Committee, trustee Rosie.
I was not committee, so I don't know which call Rebecca.
These two items were actually not listed on the, or on the community business relations committee, for tonight, because they were specifically listed for action by the village board this evening, so, Bart Carpenter, any developments here, do you wanna?
Yeah, I'd be happy to give a brief overview, and I apologize for the oversight of not getting onto the committee for discussion prior to the meeting. And then in the future, it's my understanding that special privileges will be on the Public Works Committee actually, and so I found that about the structure today. So future applications will be on the agenda under Public Works, so just get that cleared out. We have two items for parklets under consideration. Obviously, they're separate applications, but they're kind of worth looking at somewhat in tandem just because they are impacted, they do impact each other in terms of the total calculation of allowable parking that's being removed or being requested to be removed. So the first one we have on the agenda is a camp bar, which has been installed for the past 2 years. It's a 40-foot length parklet, which I think you're all familiar with. The second one is for the Broad House, which also applied last year. My understanding was denied based on the timing and the lack of a policy, not necessarily based on the merits of the application. So they were encouraged to reapply this year, so at this time we have both of those applications representing the 4,000 block of Oakland. Both applications are eligible based on location in terms of being within a parking area within the 4,000 block. They both received design approval from the Design Review Board. However, as indicated in the memo, the current parklet policy states that no more than 10% of parking may be removed for parklets without additional consideration by the village board. Of note, my understanding was that policy was intended to be 10% of the total block area. It has been pointed out since the policy is 10% of the street side. I was under the impression it was the full block, so some of my numbers in the memo may be off from what you were possibly thinking, but my intention, or my impression on all the conversations that I had was the entire 4,000 block. So if that's wrong, I guess I'd be open to consideration of that. If that's not, we are severely limited in that respect. But as I mentioned, each application is to be judged on its own merit, and the board can alter the number allowed, and they can ask for modifications of each. So both applications, staff is favorable on and is willing to hear any questions or comments they have. In the memo, I indicated that no objections were received to date. Since that time, I have forwarded you one objection that was received based on removal of public parking, and a second one that was a concern, not recommending denial per se, but just asking that the neighborhood be considered in terms of noise, litter, smoking, things like that. So I believe both applicants are here. If there's any questions for either me or if you have any questions for them, I think we'd be happy to take it. But these are separate individual applications that would require separate action. We just wrote the memo together because they're kind of lumped in the 4,000 block for consideration.
Can you run over the parking discrepancy again as far as your interpretation? I think I lost you.
So yeah, it was my interpretation the 10% removal was based on the full block, east and west side.
Oh.
But the policy, which I believe is in your packet, does specifically state no more than 10% of the available parking spaces on each side of each street block to be defined by address range may be occupied by parklets. If that were the case, there's 37 parking spaces proposed to be striped in the 4,000 block area, 18 on the east, 19 on the west. That essentially, if you would read this technically, is that only allow for removal of one parking space within the full area, 4 being considered here. Like I said, my interpretation was it was the full area, so 37, which is a 3.7, 10.8%, which I mentioned in the memo. That's more in line with my expectation, which is how I base my favorable approval for both of them, or recommendation for approval. So just letting you know that it was pointed out that I perhaps either missed that or didn't understand where that was coming from. My interpretation was it was for the full area.
So if we look at it as just one, the east side of the street, because the businesses are on the east side of the street, it's a total of how many spots removing, a request to remove how many spots?
On the east side of the street, there's 18 parking stalls that will be striped later this year. 4 of them essentially would be taken up by parklets, so it's well above the 10%. There's 19 on the west side that I was also considering that.
Right. And then, last question is, in the memo, can you give, there was a possibility of reducing the size of the Broad House parking, parklet to, only remove one space instead of 2?
Yeah, so that's a great point of conversation, I suppose, too. The striping plan is very strict in saying every car is 20 feet, and and it must park here, must park there. If the street were to be striped as parking can start here and can end here, it's quite possible that 37 number could go up to like 42, if you're parking a Fiat versus a Suburban.
Right.
And so in the memo, I alluded to the way they're placed, unfortunately, requires 2 spaces to be removed. But if the striping was different, or if you logically saw that part south of the Broad House's parklet, I think it's more than logical that 2 cars could be parked there. But based on the striping plan, there'll only be one space striped. It's my understanding that may come back for further consideration. I understand the bid is opposed to the individual spaces.
Yeah, do we have those every place? I don't.
We don't, and it's my understanding that would be new as recommended prior to me getting here. I also feel as though they're not necessary, but I don't know the history of that.
I don't know.
So I chaired the committee where this policy has originated from, and I'm not saying whether it's for or against any of these policies, but just for clarification, I was completely opposed to the 10% parking criteria, because I thought exactly what you're saying is that there's no way to really measure it. So some, it's outvoted in committee, but it does make it very tricky. So personally, I feel like that's not my criteria that I'm using, because the striping isn't consistent throughout, and so it gets a little confusing. I'm more concerned on, for this specific spot or block, I think we did have some discussion in committee about, it's closer to an intersection, that was a concern. And then the other concern that I've heard is you mentioned last meeting that we were gonna have some sort of delivery policy coming forward for loading zone, thank you very much. And I know that I've heard from a couple of residents that with the parklets, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that's been a concern that most of the businesses have some sort of drop off for beverages or for food, depending on what they sell. And making sure not to block traffic, so making sure there's places and individually that there's ways to still do deliveries without blocking up traffic.
So thank you for the presentation, and what I'm hearing is that staff is recommending that we go forward and grant both of these, even though we were taking these issues up separately. I do want to thank you for this, and I know it's kind of a good problem to have in some ways, that we have so many businesses that are lending to our Vision 2025 that had hundreds and hundreds of residents, lots of people working on, which basically is almost like a white paper for our village. And one of the big things that we've heard repeatedly is how people want a vibrant, active downtown, if you will, in Shorewood. So this is having these parklets, and I've always been a supporter of them, and I understand we do have a policy, but when we created the policy, we said that can be revised. Because when you're going from 0 to, nothing to something, you don't know what you don't know. So I would not want to be punitive to any businesses that do not fall under our policy, because the policy it's a living document. It's something that can be modified over time. And it's probably a good time, for us at some point, put it on our long laundry list of things that we have to do, because there's a lot of ordinances to occur. But so I thank you, and I thank the businesses for not only coming to town, but and sorry, just one last thing. We had the Shorewood shenanigans last weekend. There were so many people out in the community in so many different ways, and there were areas in Kensington Square that was blocked off.
And I received so many comments from residents and friends and neighbors and stuff that were out that night and that day and since then, like how great it is to have this in our village, how great it is, and having active life on the street, you can't pay for that. But that's, so anyway, I'm in support of doing what we can in order to ensure, and again, we can grant this one time, and that if there are these concerns, right, actually do materialize into real problems, we can always switch it. So, thank you.
We have a motion.
Oh, I thought we were waiting to make a motion.
So we don't have to have
I didn't know where we
amendments
were.
after amendment.
We don't have to amend.
I did raise the 10, I didn't mention the BART, the 10, because when we were reformulating the part of the policy, there was an exhibit B that we struggled with, and it was clearly 10% of the side, one side, the maximum on one side of the street. So, and that got dropped off as we shifted to county, we had the parking scheme, and county knew there was intended to have blind spots.
And with that old exhibit, for what it's worth, it assumed there to be, I believe, 91, the fee essentially would have allowed the removal of 5 parking spaces based on the estimation. So going from the estimation of lineal feet of parking available to the actual striping, definitely took that number down. So I think perhaps that 10% might have been drafted based on the assumption that those 5 spaces was accurate. But when I changed, or when I was asked to change or look at the policy of the lineal feet versus the actual number of spaces, that dramatically changed. And so I would argue that possibly the 10% was based on a number that wasn't actually real, based on actual striping, so.
We argued about it in committee, quick and simple. Sorry.
So, and this might be something, if we happen to reopen the park, is clarify the language. Depending on.
Then if I may, along that line, we did talk in committee, and it was kind of a follow-up to last meeting's approval of a parklet. We've got a disconnect between our parklet policy and our on-sidewalk seating policy. And that's specifically, there might be more, but the one I'm specifically concerned about at this point is as it relates to accessibility for the disabled. We have a parklet policy that says the parklets shall be accessible and usable by disabled persons. In discussions last meeting, we approved a installation that was not in conformance with that policy because their on-sidewalk seating was accessible. And so there was the discussion that the intent was to have accessible options outside. So the parklet might not need to be if the outdoor seating was. However, when we look at outdoor seating alone, the outdoor seating doesn't say anything at all about access for the disabled. And my point simply is I would like us in the next round of revisions to address that issue, because as it is written right now, they are neither required in the parklet nor in the sidewalk seating to provide access for disabled people. So us able-bodied people can enjoy the outdoor while the disabled must go inside and eat and drink in the dark. And I don't think that's what we want, but certainly what's not what I want. And I think it's easily taken care of in the next, I hope it's easily taken care of in the next iteration, but we discussed that in committee, so I just wanted to add that on.
Thanks for bringing that up, Trustee Zovic. The part about ADA, which I think we can move forward on, it is required in the parklet, just not in the outdoor seating. But you don't always say the intent. You know, you make a sentence and then the intent behind it gets lost. And so, intent behind that, we had a robust discussion about that in committee with the operator and BID. I actually had a conversation with BID way back a year ago, that ADA accessibility for a parklet, it's just all outdoor seating. And so, if you have it's all outdoors, one's on a plank and one's on a concrete. And so if you have ADA accessible seating, you wouldn't necessarily necessarily have to make your parklet, you know.
That's exactly what I
right.
said.
So I don't know what the change would be, but something to that effect.
The change is right now, if
The
somebody
intent.
only has sidewalk seating, there's nothing that says they've gotta have accessibility.
Right, so.
And I think we ought to do that.
And
I think it's
that's
separate
for a
applications.
future,
Yeah.
Yeah.
a future discussion, it's not genocide.
But I did want to get back to the question about delivery trucks. And just, I know you mentioned about loading zones, when does that coming forward? And then I have a follow-up question.
So the loading zone is a separate question that's come to me, and I've received 2 of them. Based on my understanding of the ordinance, I don't find a real clear policy, and quite honestly, parts of the ordinance need to be cleaned up. And so I haven't had a chance to fully tackle how I proceed moving forward with that. So I haven't received a formal application, I suppose, to bring to the board, and I'd like to have more thought on how the board could consider them, just to make sure they're for loading zones, and that they're not being utilized by one particular business over the other. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So, and I don't know, this is a special privilege, we approve them every year. I was hoping that we decided, I wasn't at the committee, but that people who already have parklets, if they were still in conformance, they didn't have to come to board, so I think